It's time to quilt! Hi everybody! I'm so happy to thank my new subscribers especially. Winter is almost over, and so is our series on wool applique by machine. Today, I will show you a quick method for sandwiching our piece. I'll also quilt it and give you some ideas about that, and we'll talk about binding the edge. First, let's get our project sandwich for quilting. There are many different ways to sandwich a quilt. But for a piece this small, I have a very simple method, and it won't take long to show you how I do it. For this step, I have prepared a piece of backing, which is quilter's cotton, a piece of low loft batting, which is a leftover, so I don't remember what it was, and of course the back of our prototype. And what I usually do is I spray with some temporary spray adhesive. In this case I'm using Sulky KK 2000, and I spray it very lightly indeed. And I smooth it over. And I spray the batting again on this side. And I smooth the backing over. Smooth it down with my hands. Then I do the other side. Very light spray. It doesn't need very much at all. And I smooth it over. And I spray the batting again. And that's all the spray I use. And I smooth it over again. And I smooth it all down with my hands, very completely smooth with my hands. On this side, and I turn it over, and I smooth it very fully on this side. So you make sure there's no wrinkles or crimps or something. And then just to keep it that way, I just pin the corners with quilter's pins. So as you see, it's all ready. It'll all stay together, and it's all smooth. So let's move to the machines. Before quilting, I machine basted around the little quiltlet using a long basting stitch. In this case, I used my Bernina Q20 with a stitch regulator in mode 3, set at 1 stitch every ½ inch. For basting with a domestic machine, just set your straight stitch as long as possible and stitch around the quiltlet. And of course, You can always baste with hand stitching or pin baste around the edge if you prefer. Below this video, I have a link to a blog post I wrote about setting up your machines for free motion quilting. So be sure to check that out. I've loaded my machine with Superior Monopoly and lowered my top tension to 1.25. This would be the same for both the domestic and the sit-down long arm. I have Superior bottom line 60 weight polyester in the bobbin in the color that matches the background. Run the stitching as close as you can to the edge of the appliques on the background fabric, but not on the applique. Stitch around all of them. On some of the shapes where I was turning circles into flowers, I have decorative stitching on the edges, but I'm just stitching around the applique right across the decorative stitching. It doesn't show. Of course, if you have one where you used a heavy satin stitch on the outside edge of the shape, you could follow the outside edge of the stitching instead. The closer you can get to the applique, the better it will look. The outlining does two things for us. The appliques stand out from the background a little better, and the quilt will be well stabilized for any kind of quilting you want to do. You can enjoy the process then without worrying about tucks and wrinkles sneaking in. Now let's have fun quilting the background. I will be using 40 weight polyester embroidery threads and some specialty threads of various weights. For the 40 weight threads, I use a 9014 non-stick needle with a default tension setting. I drew a chalk line where I will want to cut the edge before binding it. I left the excess in place so I can use it for my thread and stitch testing before doing the quilting. If you don't have enough space for this on yours, you can use a test piece instead. For the basic background quilting, you probably want to choose a color that will blend in with the background. That is because we are trying to complement the appliques with quilting that pushes back the background to the eye and moves the appliques forward. Try to space the quilting more or less evenly across the quilt to keep the quilt nice and flat without waves. Because there is not much space for more elaborate quilting and there are lots of ins and outs of the designs, I am quilting the entire background simply, with a combination of simple meander stippling, occasional swirls, and a bit of echoing around some of the appliques. This is a fun way to quilt small items like this, and it doesn't require a lot of time. If you are new to this and want to practice a little, I have a page you can download linked below with some simple free motion quilting designs you can work with. Now I am changing to some heavier specialty 12-weight threads for adding the grasses and even some accents with simple lines and curls inside some of the appliques. I'm using a 116 non-stick needle, adjusting the tension as needed. As usual, I test all of these settings first. Watch as I demonstrate these additional stitches, especially see how I do the grasses. Now let's take a look at where we are. Check to see if there is any more quilting you want to do. At this point, we're done with the quilting and it's time to move on to binding. Everyone has their own favorite way to bind a quilt, and there are already a lot of great videos out there on the subject. So I am not going to try to focus that much on binding. However, I do use a method that does not require hand stitching. I cut the edges straight and squared up our project. I'm using a 2.5 inch folded binding strip prepared from quilting cotton in the traditional way, and stitching it to the edge front with a 1/4 inch seam. Fold it to the back and use clips to hold it down. You can press this if you wish. To finish this off, I'm using a decorative stitch to stitch around the binding on the front. This also stitches down the binding on the back. Because it's a decorative stitch, it covers enough area that you are unlikely to miss stitching any section of the back binding, and it also just looks nice. I hope you've enjoyed this series on wool applique by machine. I have some exciting ideas for the future. I will be starting at least 2 series of videos that will continue for a while. One is going to be on essential techniques for landscape quilts. The first part will be a set on trees, where I'll demonstrate several small quilts with techniques for both stylized and natural-looking trees. I'm also cooking up some ideas for a set of videos on experimental quilting techniques. I've tried a lot of crazy things over the years, from appliquing Angelina fibers using veiling, to digitizing and printing my own custom fabrics, to using a lot of different techniques with different types of silks. These are going to be fun, but that's another show. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. It's free and it'll help you know when I put a new video out. If you have any questions on any of my videos, as always, you can put it in the comments section below and I will likely see it and answer it. See you next time, and above all, have fun in your studios.